Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Butler. I'm Senior Associate Commissioner and Chief Academic Officer for the Indiana Commission for Higher Education. We're doing a series of webinars by International Baccalaureate on their subject area groups. Today's group is Group 5, Mathematics, and it will be an in-depth overview. Participants will receive an in-depth information about IB curriculum assessments and have the opportunity to ask questions to support their evaluations of mathematics IB coursework. This session is designed for faculty, but I'm sure transfer experts, others can glean a lot of information from it. Our presenter today is Marie Vivas. She has extensive knowledge of the IB Diploma program from several perspectives. She's been an IB teacher, college counselor in IB schools, a director of admissions at Jacobs University, Bremen, and as the university relations manager of the IB Americas region. For over a decade, Marie has worked closely with university faculty, admissions leaders, and academic affairs officers on establishing IB credit policies and equivalencies. I can also say that she's been indispensable this past year and this year in terms of helping the Commission and helping our institutions work through statutory requirements regarding IB exam equivalencies. With that, I'll turn it over to Marie.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to see you, and hello, everyone. Yes, I'm the Senior Recognition Manager for the US and Canada, and I work closely with universities on this work. Today, I am sharing with you a session that was recorded for the Ohio Commission of Higher Education. They are doing much the same work for the same reason, legislation in the state of Ohio. And we prepared these in-depth subject group videos with them. So it's their webinar that they have kindly shared with me. And so I've been glad to be able to share it with our colleagues in Indiana as well. So there's two parts to this. The first part is where I will do sort of an IB 101, an introduction to what is IB and how does it work. And then you will hear from my colleague Tim Knight, who is the curriculum manager for the mathematics group, and he will go in depth into the two subjects. And so without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and start the recording, and hopefully this will answer a lot of your questions.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Marie Vivas, and I am the Senior Recognition Manager for the US and Canada for the IBO. In my role, I work with universities and support their work in understanding the IB better, in being welcoming institutions to IB students, and setting policy, including things like how do we grant credit. So I am essentially the liaison for all universities in the US and Canada, and very excited to be here supporting my colleagues in the state of Ohio who are working with the IB policy here. Tim, would you like to just introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and start working with the slides?
Yeah, no worries. So my name is Tim Knight. I'm what we call in the IB a curriculum manager based in The Hague in the Netherlands. And our role is, I think, we produce not just exams, I think we produce a whole curriculum. So you might argue we're the kind of beginning of the process where we review the curriculum that we currently have and we look to develop it further. And so that's the role I have. So my expertise is the curriculum, and then that leads us through to the assessment, which we'll talk about during this presentation as well. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Tim. All right, so next slide. So
I'm not seeing the slides, guys. I don't know if that's me or you.
I can see them. I'm not sure. Yeah. So the IB, we have been starting these with a sort of a quick overview of what is the IB and what is the work that we do, just in case there are colleagues who are not familiar with it. The IB started in the late 60s in Geneva, Switzerland, and in the UK. It started as a way for students in international schools, particularly students who were either in diplomatic or NGO or business assignments, had a lot of mobility through different countries to be able to attend university in a different country than the one they had completed their secondary education in. So it could be a student who was either heading back to a home country or moving out to another country that their parents were assigned to. And the idea was to create a credential that would allow that kind of mobility to different countries for these young people who would be graduating from secondary school. It's also post-war Europe. It's also Cold War Europe. And at this point, uh, educators are very concerned with the idea of how do we nurture and promote global citizenship and help students become the kinds of people who can work across cultural, linguistic, and national barriers to create a better, more peaceful world through education. So that is at the core of our mission and everything we do. And so that is part of the IB's mission. Next slide. One thing that distinguishes us from a lot of other curricula is that we are trying to look at the whole person, the whole student. And so we are nurturing some traits that we want our students to sort of develop in the whole process of being educated in IB as a way of becoming uh, well-informed global citizens who can really affect change, positive change in the world. And so our IB learner profile is here on the left. These are the 10 traits that we, across all of our programs, from primary to the diploma program, where we are encouraging schools and communities and students to really think about and try to nurture. So we want students to be inquirers, knowledgeable thinkers, communicators, principled, open-minded, caring, risk takers, balanced, and reflective. And I think reflective is really very much at the core of everything we do in IB. And so as I was reflecting, thinking about how do these traits that we're trying to nurture in our students translate into being prepared for learning and working in the 21st century? And so on the right side, we have the skills from the Partnership for 21st Century Learning. And I see the connections here between our learner profile and this set of skills as well. So if you look at that interdisciplinary nature of IB, it really tries to connect not just the subjects, but how are they connected globally? So there's a sense of global awareness, civic literacy, environmental literacy. How do we address what are the big questions that we're going to be dealing with in the 21st century, and how these skills are important, and they tie very nicely into the learner profile. The next set of skills, learning and innovation, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, communication and collaboration. Again, thinking at the core of IB, the concept of communication and collaboration across all different kinds of barriers, but in particular cultural, linguistic, and national barriers, when in a world where we really are working and collaborating globally and not just locally. Critical thinking, because we really do need to move forward with sort of an informed eye, and of course, in incentivizing and promoting creativity and different ways of problem solving. Information skills, very important with the fast pace of information that we receive on a daily basis, a sort of a tsunami of information. So information literacy, media literacy, and technology literacy, not just knowing what technology is out there, but thinking about how it is used and how we can use it ethically. So when we're asking students to think about these things as well. And then last but not least, life and career skills. And these are extremely important for students moving from secondary into university, but also from university into graduate school into the world of work. So that flexibility, adaptability, particularly in a fast moving technological world where global skills are required, initiative and self-direction, so that self-management piece of managing my time, of knowing how to move through the next steps in my learning process, taking initiative, taking responsibility for our own learning, and the social and cross-cultural skills that, as I said, are baked into everything we do in IB. Next slide. So where is IB? Yes, we are in all three regions of the world, the Americas, the Africa, Europe, Middle East region, and the Asia Pacific region. One thing I do want to point out is that it's a common misconception that IB is mostly in private schools, because as you can see, it's a fairly even distribution between private and public schools. We do have 4 programs: primary, which is ages 3 to 11, middle years, which is ages 12 to 15, and then the last 2, which are our high school leaving credentials, which are the diploma program and the career-related program, in what we call that 16 to 19 group. And the other thing I will point out is that in the United States, we have the largest number of IB programs in the world. So not just diploma programs, as you can see, but all around programs. We are seeing tremendous growth in places like Canada and China and India, but also across sort of newer countries in other parts of the world, with initiatives in sub-Saharan Africa and in Latin America. So these are high school leaving programs, so that this is a high school credential. So moving to the next slide. I did mention, of course, that in the US, we have a lot of IB programs. Now, the US is a very unique place. We have close to 2,000 IB schools at this point in the US. 89% of those schools are public schools, and 62% of those schools are Title I schools. Title I schools are schools where the majority of students qualify for a free and reduced lunch, so that means that they're traditionally low income or underserved population. And I will point out that this is a very good picture of what is happening in the state of Ohio. So when you're looking at your students coming in from in-state, you're going to be seeing a vast majority of them coming from public schools, and many, many of them coming from Title I schools. And this is why the question of standard level credit that we're talking about today becomes extremely important, because these are the students for whom affordability is a great challenge. And receiving credit for the subjects that they have done, for the rigorous academic work they have done in their high school careers, is a way to increase affordability, and B, a way to incentivize students to indeed take those challenging courses that will prepare them to thrive in university studies. Next slide. So we do have three options from what we call the 16 plus students, the 16 to 19-year-olds. And these are our high school leaving options, right? So we're going to be talking in a moment about the full diploma. This is the IB sort of flagship credential. Our first cohort graduated in 1968. Students take 6 subjects and a core. If they complete all the elements and pass all the elements, then they will receive the full diploma, which is the credential that allows them to move between countries, and have that mobility into university programs. Then we have the career-related program on the right. That is a hybrid that combines IB education and IB core, IB courses, along with career and technical education, and a career pathway. And that is also a high school leaving credential. A smaller number of programs here, because this first cohort only graduated in 2012, so it's a relatively new program, although a lot of students in the US are engaged in the career-related program. And then our IB diploma courses. And you're going to see a lot of this coming from Ohio. Students who have different varieties of curricula, so they may have AP, honors, and dual enrollment in their school, and they're choosing to be more modular. So they're taking 1, 2, 3 IB subjects, maybe an AP subject, maybe a dual enrollment subject. These students are not getting a full credential, but they're coming with a course. And that course is being treated in exactly the same way, no matter which of these 3 options the students are. They're taking the same class, they're covering the same content, and they're being assessed in the same way. So around the world, students, whether they're doing a course as part of the diploma, as part of courses, or as part of the CP, they're getting the same experience and the same assessment. Next slide. So just going to spend a few minutes here on the DP curriculum model. As you can see, at the center of everything, we have the learner profile. This is very much student-centered learning. So we do train teachers on different approaches to teaching IB pedagogy, but we're also asking students to reflect on how they learn, their approaches to learning. So that is actually part of every course and every activity that IB does is how do I learn? How do I become a partner in this learning process? Moving out to the light blue circle, you will see the elements of the core, theory of knowledge, extended essay, and CAS. Now, theory of knowledge is an IB course. It actually is a course where we discuss how do we think critically about knowledge, how do we apply it, how do we work within ethical bounds. It is very much a course that is a reflection on how we know, ways of knowing, and critical thinking. It is a class that is evaluated by IB, and students are assigned a grade. It's a fairly intense writing course. Then we have the extended essay, which is a 4,000 word research paper. This is independent work done by the student. They can pick any IB subject that exists, and they will have to produce this 4,000 word research paper, bibliography, academic integrity, all of these things are accounted for in this work. And then CAS, Creativity Activity Service, co-curricular activities. We ask students to reflect upon that process in a journal, what they're learning, how they're growing. And so completing these three elements is the core and required to get the full diploma. We're going to move now into the subject groups, but before we do that, I did want to talk to you a little bit. We have been throwing this term standard level at you. We do have two sets of courses in all the subjects. We have higher level courses and we have standard level courses. The reason I've been focused on standard level specifically is because around the state of Ohio, our higher level courses have fairly strong recognition already, and many students are receiving credit for that. So I have chosen to focus predominantly on standard level courses, but I did want you to understand what the difference between the two was from a general perspective. So going back to when IB started back in Europe, many of those students were going to continue being educated at European universities. And so one of the goals of the group of educators that came up with this was to be able to ensure that students had that in-depth knowledge. Because in Europe, you go directly into a major. There are no intro courses. There's no freshman year as it was. You are going directly into a major. So within that context, they looked at the secondary school systems in Europe, the BAC, the Abitur, the A levels, and those were all systems where students take about 3 courses in the last 2 years of high school, and they focus in depth in the rigor and content and skills that they need for their majors so they can jump directly into major courses. And so those are the higher level courses. So a student who wants to do engineering might do IB physics and chemistry and mathematics, for example, at the higher level. So think of those as the courses in your major. But international schools really wanted to have sort of more well-rounded students, so they didn't want to just have the students doing sort of this in-depth learning. So they came up with a concept of the standard level courses. And the standard level courses they're equally rigorous. They're more equivalent to your AP courses in high school. And they are designed sort of as a well-rounded piece, right? So if you think of higher level courses as the major courses and standard level courses as your liberal arts requirement, that's a good proxy for us. The big difference here is in depth. So the higher level students will be doing in-depth work, but the standard level students and the higher level students will be sharing a lot of the same work. It's just the extensions for higher level. So moving now into the 6 groups, we have studies in language and literature. These are the courses in which the language in which the student is most academically competent. So it can be native language, it can be the language of instruction of the school, it can be the language of the country. But these are the courses where essentially in the US, we're talking about the freshman composition types of courses, again, at the higher and standard level. Language acquisition, those are for language learners. So these are students who have had various types of exposures to a foreign language, as it were, and they are learning that language as opposed to being academically competent in that language from the beginning. Individuals and societies are social sciences and humanities. And there are a couple of really cool interdisciplinary courses here. Think of this sort of history, global politics, environmental studies. There's just a wide range of courses, both at the higher and standard level. Group 4 is the sciences. It includes all the experimental sciences, a couple of those multidisciplinary courses, and some really innovative courses designed for students who want to specialize, let's say, in the biomedical field and so on. Group 5, mathematics, which is what we're going to talk about, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. And then the arts, which are all performance-based courses. So students are being graded on either their portfolio or a performance of some piece of art that they've created. So next slide, please. These are your DP requirements, because I know that some of us like to have something to read. I will note there the difference, notice the difference in hours between standard and higher levels. So the standard level are fairly equivalent to what most AP courses in high school are doing now. Next slide. Now, I mentioned that this career-related program is more of a hybrid program. We're combining technical skills, employability skills, and academic skills into one credential here. And so the students are required to take a minimum of 2 IB diploma courses. Remember, these are the same courses, same assessments, same classroom as their DP counterparts. We do know from our data that most students are taking between 3 and 4 courses, it's not just 2. So they're challenging themselves with the academic rigor of IB through their diploma program courses. Then we move into the core. It's slightly different from the core in the diploma because, again, it's very geared to whatever career pathway students choose. So we have service learning. This is an area where students will choose to do service learning that is related to their career pathway. So for example, if they're an elementary education career pathway, they might choose to work as volunteers at the daycare center, or I've seen a group of students that set up a sports program for an after school care across the street. So there's a lot of different ways of doing service learning. The reflective project is a 3,000 word research paper on an ethical concern in their career pathway. And again, bibliography, academic integrity, all of these are part, but this is an independent paper that students are doing. Language development, because we do require every student who is completing an IB credential to have a language experience. Most of in the other programs is done through specific courses, but because of the flexibility of the career-related program, they may not be taking an IB language course. So there are different ways of fulfilling that language requirement, but that is part of what they have to do. And then personal and professional skills. How do we present ourselves? How do we collaborate, communicate in the world of work and in the world of career? And so here students are sort of learning those interpersonal and professional skills that are required to work to move forward into the world of work. And then the career-related studies, which are the career pathways in the United States, predominantly done through the career and technical education in the school. This is not administered by IB. We ask the school to certify that the student has completed the pathway. We will actually, as part of the authorization process, want to understand what the pathways are, but that portion is run by the school. So when you receive an IB transcript that's career program, we will say career pathway completed. That's the certification from the school, but all the other elements are being graded and monitored by IB. Moving to the next slide. Again, here, the requirements that I mentioned in a written form for those of us who like to read. Next slide. And this is my final 2 slides here. We actually, as I mentioned earlier, have had very strong recognition for our higher level courses for 50, 60 years at this point. And so moving on, we wanted to increase recognition for our standard level qualifications. So we contracted with the American Council on Education, ACE, to review our most subscribed standard level courses and to evaluate and make recommendations. ACE has done a great job with this. Can we move to the next slide? So they reviewed many of our courses, including, by the way, the standard level mathematics courses that we're going to discuss today. And they have recommended that for IB scores of 4 or higher for the standard level subjects, students be awarded at least 3 semester hours of credit for IB scores. And this, by the way, links directly to the ACE website. And I think this will be a support to the faculty because I know that you will want to evaluate the courses yourselves, and we will be providing materials in, including the subject guides and the most recent May 2024 assessments that you are able so that you will be able to use that as part of your evaluation. But a nice thing about the ACE review is they did do an in-depth review of all of these things. They came up with these recommendations, and they've done some basic crosswalking to course equivalences in U.S. universities and colleges. So hopefully this will give you a jumping off point instead of having to start from scratch. Okay, I am now going to hand this over to Tim.
Hi, thanks, Marie. One thing, Lisa, I'm not seeing your screen. It might be a bandwidth issue. So I can see my presentation, my end. So I'll just call out the title. So we're on the same slide, right? So if you go to the slide, which is titled Agenda, and I'll just let everybody know what I want to talk about. First thing, I said I'm curriculum manager. I've also was an IB teacher for, I don't say how long, but let's say 20 years, maybe a little bit more. So I've seen students taking HL and SL at schools around the world, entering into US colleges, doing all kinds of courses at all kinds of universities. So I've got real confidence in this program. So I would like to just, 3 things I want to talk about. First is our development process. So what informs our curriculum? Then what are in our IB courses, the kind of the content level, and then talk about how we do our assessment. So we could move forward 2 slides to the slide titled Curriculum Development Principles. So Marie's touched on a lot of this already, but I think it's worth saying again. When we design an IB curriculum, it's broad and balanced. It's conceptual. It's not just about memorizing stuff. It's, as you can see from Marie's presentation, it's really connected. We're interested in not subjects in isolation. And also, it's always going to be, apart from a few little things like the CAS service learning, it's assessed. So when we're designing, we want to remove barriers to learning. We want students to learn wherever they come from, whoever they are. It's about students, student-based learning as much as possible. Students lead the learning. And it's not teaching of math or whatever subject is in isolation. We want it to be in a context of the students' local and global lives. And it's conceptual. We want students to think big and think in terms of the meta ideas involved in the course, and involves, where we can, collaboration. And again, the teaching should be informed by assessment. So next slide, please, Lisa. So in terms of mathematics, well, what does that mean? Well, we want mathematics to encourage conceptual understanding. We're not just interested in students' procedural knowledge, being able to follow a formula. We want them to be able to actually understand what they're doing. We want mathematics classrooms which encourage mathematical discourse. I visited a lot of IB classrooms. I've been in a lot of IB classrooms, and we want to see teachers talking to the students, students talking to the teacher, and the students talking to each other. We want it to be a mathematical learning community as much as possible. We recognize with our curriculum that technology is really important to mathematics these days, and we want to make the most appropriate use of that technology in the classroom, not just as a tool for pedagogy, but also to do mathematics. So all these design considerations have led us over the time to end up with 2 different courses. One is called Analysis and Approaches, and one is called Applications and Interpretations. And each of those courses both have a higher level and a standard level. And again, the real difference between them is the amount of time spent on the teaching and the depth of the course. If you can go ahead now to IB Mathematics courses, Lisa, and go to the next slide, and it's entitled, Who are the courses for? So we have these 2 courses, Analysis and Approaches, Application and Interpretations. There's quite a lot of writing here, I apologize. I'm not going to read it all out, but fundamentally, I don't want to, I'm aware of using these words, but there is an element of the analysis and approaches being more the pure mathematics and the applications and interpretations being more the applied mathematics. That doesn't mean they're completely separate categories. There is a lot of overlap. However, the emphasis in the analysis is about fluency of mathematical arguments, skills in mathematical thinking, using technology and not using technology, constructing correct arguments, and of course, enjoying the thrill of problem solving. The applications, there we're looking to intersect more with the real world. We're interested in solving problems in context, and we want students to really lean into the technology in this course. We also have things like modeling in here, and again, we still want students to really enjoy the courses. So next slide, please. And this is the syllabus. So I'm not going to go through the syllabus, but notice there are 5 topics: numerology, functions, geometry, statistics, and calculus. And we provide recommended teaching hours. And obviously that relates to the amount of syllabus material relevant to each of those topics. There's also these 30 hours we call the toolkit. And this is very much to give teachers time and space to allow their students to inquire into mathematics and also complete something we call the internal assessment, which is a student project which is assessed internally by the teacher and then moderated externally by the IB. Now that's the analysis course, and you'll notice the calculus has, say, 55 hours of teaching for HL, about half of that for SL. But in terms of cognitive demand, they'll be very similar. It's really about the amount of work or material the student has to acquire, rather than about necessarily the difficulty of it. If we go to the analysis course, we'll notice the numbers change a bit, but we still have the same 5 topics. So the 2 courses have a lot of overlap. However, the emphasis is somewhat different. So in the analysis course, there's a bit more emphasis on the calculus, and in the applications course, there's a bit more emphasis on the statistics. But notice both have statistics and both have calculus. Going ahead to assessment. These are the assessment objectives, and we value knowledge and understanding, of course. Problem solving is fundamental to what we do. Communication matters. So when we look at assessment, we ask students to show their working. We assess that working. Method marks are awarded, and that's an important part of the process. Technology is important to us, and a lot of the papers are technology enabled using graphing calculators. Reasoning and arguments are really important. Again, method marks and reasoning marks are awarded in assessment. And the inquiry approaches are also important to us, and that's where the project comes in, where students can explore some mathematics that they're interested for themselves. In terms of assessment, so this is the way the assessment looks for the SL, the standard level course. One thing it's important to note is that the SL content is a subset of the HL content. Within an SL exam, and here we'll see paper 1 and paper 2, 60% of that exam is common to the HL papers. So in that sense, the SL and the HL have a lot of overlap. And again, in terms of cognitive demand, are very similar. It's about the amount of study as much as the difficulty of the study. So in the analysis course, the paper 1 you'll notice is no technology. So this is just a pen and paper exam, and students will have no access to any technology whatsoever. They just have themselves, and obviously the paper is written accordingly. The paper 2, technology in this case is required, and students will have to make choices within that paper when to use technology and when not to use technology. Each of these papers are worth 40% of the final grade, and that's a total of 80, of course, and there's a final 20% for this project, which we call internal assessment. In fact, its proper name is the exploration. If we look at the next slide, which is the assessment of applications and interpretations, again, a very similar structure of paper. Paper 1, paper 2, internal assessment. The only real difference here is the applications, because it's very much more it's somewhat more focused on statistics and mathematical modeling. Technology is required on all the assessments. So notice here we have a paper 1 of 40%, a paper 2 also of 40%, but in the paper 1, technology is allowed. An internal assessment is exactly the same task and is worth 20%. And again, there will be about 60% of both the papers which will be common to the HL papers. Wanting to think about analysis and applications is in terms of students, the analysis course is very much for students who are certainly an HL course prepares the students very much to go to university and do a major immediately in mathematics or related subject. And the SL course, an analysis would absolutely qualify students to study most science courses and engineering courses. Applications also would allow students to enter a lot of technical STEM type courses, but certainly is really, really powerful for students interested in economics, psychology, courses where statistics would be important, but that technology use can also be really helpful for engineering. Very quickly, these are the HL situations, and the HL is very similar in structure, slightly longer papers because obviously there's a bit more content, and there is one additional paper 3, which is like extended response questions, and that's the same structure for the HL and the SL. Okay, going to the slide external assessment. So just a few things to note here. And I guess, and what I don't want to talk about AP and make comparisons. I've taught AP, by the way, but just worth noting, in our assessment, there are no multiple choice questions. All papers are short response or extended response, but those responses have expect mathematical working and are graded by human graders. Using an analytic mark scheme. The grade boundaries, the cutoff grades, are published every year. So that's important in mathematics. Obviously, we need confidence that year on year our standards are consistent, and we go through a whole grade award system to look at student performance year on year to ensure that each year the cutoff grades are appropriate, and a 6 is a 6, out of 7, a 7 is a 7, a 5 is a 5, and so on. So we have real confidence in the reliability of the assessment year on year, paper to paper, and also across the different courses. We have different types of questions on all the papers. We have short response questions between 4 and 9 marks, extended response, and then the paper 3 questions for HL are much longer questions which require a degree of extended thinking. Okay, last slide, just talk about this idea of the internal assessment. As I say, you can think of it as project work. This is the mathematical exploration, and it's a piece of work which is between 12 and 20 pages long on a topic that the student chooses for themselves. It's marked against 5 criteria: presentation, communication, personal engagement, use of mathematics and reflection. And it's internally assessed by teachers, but then externally moderated by sampling. So let's say you've got 20 students, there'll be a sample of, let's say, 5 of those students will be sent off for external moderation, and a moderator factor will be applied if necessary to that. Okay, I feel like there's a lot to cover, and I didn't cover everything, but hopefully it gives you a sense of the starting off with the math curriculum, and I really hope there are a few questions that I can answer if there are any out there.
So that concludes the formal presentation on the IB Math Group, and I hope that this is helpful to everyone. Matt, I believe that this is actually a good stopping point for us, and if folks do need to reach out, well, you know, you have the contact information for myself and with any questions, but I hope this is helpful to our colleagues that are reviewing the math IB courses for credit in Indiana.
Yes, thank you, Marie, and thank you for those who've watched this recording to help inform their IB equivalency work and faculty review of mathematics courses. Again, we will have these recordings of other webinars on subject areas posted to the Commission's website and or shared through the Teams channel for IB work. And as Marie said, and we've said before, we're at your service to answer particular questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.